You already know the surface story of your addiction, the substance, the habit, the craving. But beneath it lies something darker and far more human. Your compulsion is not just escape, it is your psyche crying out for transformation. How many nights have you sworn it was the last time, only to return again? How many mornings have you woken with regret, promising yourself that today would be different, yet feeling the pull before the day has even begun? Addiction is not random weakness, it is a mirror. It shows you what you repress, what you refuse to feel, what you bury so deeply that only compulsion can drag it out. Ask yourself, are you truly craving the substance, or the relief from wounds you have never faced? Is the cycle not proof that the problem is deeper than willpower? That the root lies in the unconscious itself? Jung warned that the path to wholeness requires descent. To face your shadow, to see the truth beneath illusion, to name what you have denied, that is the only road to freedom. Your addiction is not just the poison, it is also the symptom of your unlived life. Have you not sensed that what you call escape is actually bondage, and that what terrifies you most, the confrontation with yourself, may be the only cure? The brutal question remains, will you keep numbing the pain, or will you descend into it long enough to be remade? Addiction does not begin with a bottle, a pill, a needle, or a screen. It begins in silence, an ache you could not name, a wound you could not face, a loneliness you could not endure. Instead of confronting the darkness within you, you reached for something outside to numb it. But did the substance ever truly satisfy you? Or did it only mute your pain long enough to deepen it? From childhood, you were taught to repress what was inconvenient, your anger, your grief, your fear. You learned to wear masks of strength and control while burying the parts of yourself that cried for help. And yet those buried parts did not disappear. They resurfaced as cravings, compulsions, escapes. How many times have you told yourself, this is the last time, only to feel the pull stronger than ever? How many times have you promised change, only to break your own vow? Is this not evidence that addiction is more than a bad habit, that it is the voice of your unconscious demanding recognition? Jung warned that what you repress will rule you. Addiction is the proof. Each time you push your shadow deeper, the compulsion grows stronger. Each time you deny your pain, the craving intensifies. You think you are chasing pleasure, but are you not really fleeing from truth? And has not the very escape become your prison? The context is, merciless addiction is not simply a moral flaw or lack of discipline. It is the psyche's desperate attempt to balance itself. You seek wholeness, but in the wrong form. You long for transcendence, but mistake oblivion for salvation. And so you remain trapped, cycling between euphoria and despair, between escape and collapse. So the piercing question presses in. Will you continue numbing the wound that cries for healing, or will you finally dare to face it? For only when you descend into the roots of your pain can you rise into freedom. Jung's truth is severe but liberating. Addiction is not the end of you, it is the beginning of transformation if you dare to confront what lies beneath. To understand addiction through Jung's eyes, you must look deeper than the surface of cravings, habits, or substances. Addiction is not random. It is a psychic drama where repressed forces of the unconscious seize control of your life. Jung's framework reveals how persona, shadow complexes, projection, and the self all intertwine to create, sustain, and ultimately offer a path beyond addiction. The persona, the mask of control. You wear a face to the world, the persona built from expectations of family, society, and culture. It is the mask of being fine, in control, responsible. Yet behind it, chaos brews. How many times have you assured others and yourself that you can quit any time, that you are not like those people? How often have you played the role of strength while secretly bowing to compulsion? This is the persona at work. Addiction festers in secrecy because your mask cannot admit its weakness. Jung warned, when you over-identify with the mask, the denied reality erupts elsewhere. Addiction is the eruption, the proof that no mask can silence the truth beneath. Ask yourself how much of your control is performance and how much is collapse hiding behind a smile. The shadow, the repressed core of addiction. At the heart of addiction lies shadow, the parts of you refuse to face. Rage, grief, loneliness, inadequacy, all buried in silence. But repression does not erase, it festers, and in addiction the shadow finds a channel. The substance becomes a substitute for anger, unspoken tears, unshed desires, unlived. Each drink, hit, or binge is your shadow demanding recognition. Do you not sense that what you consume is less about pleasure and more about silencing the cries of what you repress? Until you face your shadow, the craving remains unquenchable because you are not trying to fill an empty cup but silence a screaming wound. Complexes, wounds that chain you to cycles. Addiction is not simply about the present, it is bound to the past. Complexes, Jung taught, are clusters of emotion and memory lodged in the psyche. Perhaps you were abandoned, shamed, unseen. Perhaps you were told you were not enough or that your worth depended on performance. These wounds form complexes that bind you. Each time life reactivates them, you turn to the substance for relief. The cycle of craving, indulgence, regret, and despair is not random. It is the reactivation of old pain. How many times have you noticed that your worst relapses follow rejection, shame, or loneliness? Is this not proof that your addiction is chained to childhood wounds that have never been integrated? Projection, the false enemy and false savior. Addiction thrives on projection. You blame the stress, the partner, the world, anything but yourself. Or you project salvation onto the next cure, the next promise, the next external fix. But projection is a trap. The enemy is not outside, the wound is within. The savior is not a pill, a new distraction, or even a flawless program. It is your willingness to face the inner truth. How often have you believed that if only the world treated you differently, you would be free? How often have you convinced yourself that one more attempt, one more substitution would solve it? And how often has this illusion collapsed? Projection blinds you to reality. The battle is not against life itself, but against your refusal to meet yourself fully. The self, individuation, and healing. At the center of Jung's psychology stands the self, the wholeness you are called to embody. Addiction is the counterfeit of transcendence. Individuation is the real thing. Addiction promises escape, unity, and peace, but delivers only fragmentation. The self demands integration. Healing is not merely quitting the substance, it is reclaiming the parts of you split off by repression, shame, and illusion. Wholeness arises when persona is unmasked, shadow is integrated, complexes are healed, and projections are withdrawn. Ask yourself, do you not long for something more permanent than the fleeting high? Do you not sense that beneath the craving lies a deeper hunger, not for escape, but for union with yourself? The interplay of these forces taken together, these elements form the architecture of addiction. Persona denies the wound. Shadow grows in silence. Complexes reactivate the pain. Projection blinds you to its roots, and addiction becomes the substitute for the self, a false wholeness that never lasts. This is why you cannot willpower yourself free, because the battle is not on the surface, but in the depths of the unconscious. Until you descend there, you remain trapped. So the piercing questions confront you. How much longer will you pretend control while hiding collapse? How many more years will you silence your shadow with substances instead of listening to it? How often will you repeat the cycle of shame, regret, and relapse without admitting the wound beneath? And most urgently, will you cling to the illusion that addiction is only a habit? Or will you accept that it is the psyche itself crying for integration? Because Jung's insight is merciless but liberating. What you repress enslaves you, and what you integrate sets you free. Addiction is not just poison, it is the symptom of your unlived life. And the only cure is to live that life fully consciously, without disguise. Your task is severe but possible: to descend into shadow, to face your complexes, to withdraw projections, and to align with the self. Only then does healing begin, not as abstinence alone, but as wholeness. You are not called merely to stop using, you are called to be reborn. The question is whether you will dare the descent. Abstraction becomes clear only when you see it lived. Addiction is not merely theory, it is a lived cycle repeated across work relationships, family, and daily life. Each sphere exposes the same pattern: repression, escape, collapse, and shame. And in each, Jung's insights show the deeper forces at work. Workplace escape in the disguise of productivity. You tell yourself that work is neutral, even noble, but beneath the surface, it often becomes the mask for your addiction. Stress builds, deadlines close in, humiliation or fear of failure awakens your buried complexes. And so you reach for your chosen substance, or overwork itself becomes the drug. Have you noticed how many nights you celebrate a finished task with a drink, a pill, or a binge? How often just to take the edge off turns into collapse? In truth, the office becomes the stage where your persona plays competent, while the shadow demands its secret ritual. Addiction thrives here because no one questions the cost of productivity. But beneath your performance lies bondage, your soul crying for relief in the only language it has learned. Relationships, bonds broken by the stronger bond. You may say you love your partner, your children, your friends, but addiction always takes the greater vow. You sneak away, lie, justify. Each betrayal cuts trust, yet you cannot stop. Ask yourself, how many times have you promised change only to betray again? How often have you seen the disappointment in the eyes of those you love, yet felt powerless against the craving? This is not because you love them less, but because the substance has become your false self, the only place where you feel whole, if only for a moment. Jung would say, you project salvation onto the drug, making it more sacred than your own family. Is this not why the addiction feels like a marriage stronger than love itself? And does this not reveal that until you find wholeness within, no relationship outside can withstand the shadow you keep feeding? Family, the generational curse. Look deeper and you may see the cycle repeating. Perhaps your father drank, your mother numbed herself with pills, or your grandparents carried silent wounds. Addiction rarely begins with you. It is often the echo of unresolved pain handed down. Jung's theory of complexes explains this. The wound of one generation becomes the unhealed inheritance of the next. How many times have you sworn, I will never be like them, only to wake up one day realizing you are repeating their path? This repetition is not accident. It is the unconscious demanding integration. Until someone in the line faces the shadow, the cycle continues. And the piercing question arises, will you be the one to break it, or will you pass it on again? Daily life compulsions beyond substances. Addiction is not limited to drugs or alcohol. It hides in screens, food, pornography, shopping, even spirituality. Anything can become compulsion when it serves as escape. Have you noticed how you cannot sit in silence without reaching for your phone? How you binge shows not because they delight you, but because they numb the emptiness. How you eat or scroll or gamble past the point of joy, driven by something deeper than pleasure. These are not random habits, they are rituals of avoidance. Jung would call them substitutes for unlived life. Each time you reach compulsively, you silence the voice that would otherwise cry out, face me, heal me, live me. Do you not sense that what you chase is never the thing itself, but the quieting of the wound beneath? The mirror across all examples work. Love, family, daily habits, they all mirror the same truth. Addiction is not about the object, it is about the subject. The substance or behavior is the mask. The real drama is in the psyche. You are not enslaved to alcohol, pills, or screens. You are enslaved to your refusal to meet yourself. And this is why your attempts to quit often fail you. Battle the symptom, not the source. Until you unmask the persona, integrate the shadow, heal the complexes, withdraw the projections, and orient toward the self, you remain bound. So the piercing questions rise. How many more mornings will you wake in regret, wondering why willpower is never enough? How many more promises will you break before you see that the battle is deeper than behavior? How long will you blame stress, family, or circumstance instead of facing the wound within? And most urgently, will you keep repeating the cycle across every arena of life? Or will you dare to see that addiction is the symptom of a deeper hunger for wholeness? Because Jung's insight is severe. You do not crave the substance, you crave yourself. And until you face this truth, every workplace, every relationship, every family, every daily act becomes a stage for repetition. But the moment you turn, descend, and confront the shadow, you break the cycle. Addiction becomes not your end, but your initiation. Your examples are merciless mirrors. The question is whether you will dare to see yourself in them. Addiction feels like chaos, but beneath the surface, it follows a structure as precise as any ritual. Jung would call this a psychic system: repression, projection, compulsion, collapse, shame, and renewal. It is not random failure, but a cycle your unconscious engineers repeating until you finally face what lies beneath. To understand this system is to strip addiction of its mystery, exposing it for what it truly is, a counterfeit search for wholeness. Psychological repression as the root. The mechanism begins in the mind. You learned early to repress what was inconvenient: grief, anger, fear, loneliness. These exiled parts did not vanish, they sank into the unconscious. Addiction emerges when the repressed demands expression. You think you are reaching for alcohol pills or screens, but in truth, you are reaching for the pain you refuse to face. Have you noticed how your cravings grow stronger whenever you suppress emotion? How each "I'm fine" builds the pressure until escape feels irresistible? Jung warned, what you repress will return, not as memory, but as compulsion. Emotional shame as the fuel. Repression gives birth to addiction, but shame sustains it. Each time you indulge, guilt floods in. Instead of releasing you, it chains you more tightly. You promise change, fail, and sink deeper. Is this not why the cycle feels endless? Because the very emotion meant to stop you becomes the leash that binds you. Jung insisted that shame is a mask for unlived truth. The more you hide, the stronger the craving becomes. Ask yourself, how much of your energy is spent hiding what everyone already knows, and what might happen if, instead of concealing, you confessed? Behavior. The cycle of compulsion, addiction, is lived in behavior. The pattern is merciless craving, indulgence, regret, vow, relapse. You repeat it not because you are weak, but because the system is intact. The behavior is the visible symptom of an invisible structure. Have you noticed how often you act against your own will, as if another force were steering you? Jung would say this is the autonomous complex, the unconscious taking control of your hands, your mouth, your days. You are not broken, but you are divided. Until you integrate what drives the cycle, you will live as if possessed. Ethical betrayal of self and others. Addiction is never private, even when done in secret. Each act is a betrayal, not just of those you love, but of yourself. You lie, you rationalize, you excuse. Over time, you no longer know whether you are hiding from others or from your own conscience. Jung saw this as the collapse of integrity, the self withdrawing when the ego colludes with falsehood. Is this not why you feel hollow after each indulgence? Not because the substance failed, but because you betrayed your own soul to serve it. And how long can you live divided before collapse becomes inevitable? Existential addiction as false transcendence. At its deepest, addiction is not about pleasure at all. It is about transcendence. You seek to rise above pain, to dissolve into unity, to escape the burden of being yourself. But the substance delivers only counterfeit transcendence, a fleeting high that collapses into despair. Jung warned that the true path to transcendence is individuation, facing the shadow, integrating the repressed, aligning with the self. Addiction mimics this path but leaves you emptier each time. Ask yourself, are you truly craving the substance or the wholeness it falsely promises? And if the high has never delivered, why do you return again and again? Because beneath the substance, the soul still cries for God, for self, for union with what is real. The interlocking cycle. These mechanisms do not stand alone. They form a closed system. Repression fuels shame. Shame drives compulsion. Compulsion breeds betrayal. Betrayal deepens shame. And the cycle repeats, sustained by the counterfeit transcendence that keeps you bound. This is why willpower fails you. You cannot escape a system by fighting its symptoms. You must dismantle the structure at its root. And that root is always the same, the refusal to face what you have buried. So the piercing questions rise. How much longer will you run from wounds that only grow stronger in silence? How many more times will you cycle through craving and collapse before admitting the real hunger is for wholeness, not the drug? How long will you betray yourself with counterfeit transcendence instead of enduring the fire of real transformation? And most urgently, will you dare to descend into the shadow? Knowing that only there can the cycle be broken. Because Jung's warning is merciless. What you repress will enslave you, but what you face can heal you. Addiction is not merely a bad habit, it is the unconscious crying for recognition. Until you honor that cry, the cycle will continue. But the moment you descend, admit, and integrate, the mechanism collapses. You are no longer bound. Addiction, once tyrant, becomes teacher, the wound that leads you back to yourself. The structure is clear. The question is whether you will keep repeating it or break it by finally daring to face the truth within. Addiction dismantles you in layers, but healing is also layered. Jung would insist it is not enough to remove the substance, you must confront the psyche that demanded it. Without this, abstinence becomes another mask and relapse lurks in the shadows. Healing requires courage not only to stop using, but to face the wounds you once numbed. The practices below are not quick fixes, they are disciplines of integrity, ways of reclaiming the self that addiction buried. Observation, tracing the roots of craving. You cannot heal what you refuse to see. Begin by observing when cravings rise. Is it after conflict? In loneliness? In silence? Each trigger is not random. It is a mirror pointing to the wound you have exiled. Have you noticed that your craving is less about the substance and more about the moment it arises? That the need comes strongest when you feel most unseen, unloved, or powerless. Observation without judgment exposes the pattern. Addiction is not about the bottle, the pill, the screen. It is about what you are trying not to feel. Will you dare to track your cravings until they reveal the shadow you have been running from? Boundaries, breaking secrecy with accountability. Addiction thrives in secrecy. Healing demands exposure. You must set boundaries, both within and without. Within, you draw a line. No more excuses, no more lies to yourself. Without, you seek accountability, someone you trust who will not collude with your illusions. Have you noticed how addiction loses some of its grip when spoken aloud? How secrecy deepens its power, but truth begins to dismantle it? Boundaries protect you from both relapse and denial. Will you dare to end the silence and confess not as weakness, but as the first act of fidelity to yourself? Shadow work, facing the pain directly. At the core of every addiction lies pain. Anger swallowed in childhood, grief unexpressed, loneliness ignored. You cannot heal while you keep these wounds buried. Jung insisted the shadow must be faced, integrated, made conscious. This means allowing yourself to feel what you once fled, to sit in anger without numbing it, to grieve without silencing it, to admit the loneliness without running from it. Have you not sensed that the substance was only a shield protecting you from this encounter? And yet is not the shield itself now the source of your suffering? To face the shadow is terrifying, but it is also liberating, for the monster in the dark shrinks when brought to light. Reframe addiction as longing for wholeness. If you see addiction only as weakness, you remain trapped in shame. But if you see it as misdirected longing for wholeness, the path changes. Addiction is your soul crying out, "There is more." The high you chase is counterfeit, but the longing behind it is real. What you truly seek is integration, peace, unity. Have you considered that addiction is not your enemy, but your teacher, pointing you toward the self? That the hunger beneath the habit is holy, demanding satisfaction, not in escape, but in truth. When you reframe addiction, you no longer battle it, you listen to it. And in listening, you uncover what you were always meant to seek. Daily fidelity rituals of integrity, healing, is not dramatic, it is daily. Each day you must choose truth over illusion, discipline over compulsion, integrity over secrecy. This does not mean perfection, it means fidelity. One small act of honesty, one refusal to betray yourself, one ritual that anchors you in wholeness. Perhaps it is journaling instead of numbing. Perhaps it is calling a trusted friend instead of reaching for the bottle. Perhaps it is sitting in silence, enduring the urge until it passes. Have you noticed how each small act builds strength? How the same way rituals once sustained addiction, new rituals can sustain freedom. Will you choose each day to practice fidelity even when no one is watching? Relational discernment, healing through truthful connection. Addiction isolates, healing reconnects. But not all connections heal. You must discern who strengthens your fidelity and who tempts your collapse. Some relationships exist only to sustain your illusions. Others demand your wholeness. Ask yourself, who thrives only when I hide? Who respects me only when I perform? Who still stands beside me when I confess the truth? The answer reveals your real community. Healing is impossible alone, but it is equally impossible among those who demand your collusion with falsehood. Will you dare to leave behind those who bind you and draw near to those who strengthen you? Endurance, facing the fire without numbing. Perhaps the hardest practice is endurance. When you stop numbing, the pain surfaces. Shame screams louder. Cravings intensify. The void feels unbearable. This is the moment most relapse occurs, not because healing failed, but because the soul was on the brink of transformation. Jung said, "No tree grows to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." Will you endure the descent without reaching for your old escape? Will you let the fire burn away the false self until only truth remains? Endurance is severe, but it is the only path through. What you refuse to endure now, you will repeat forever. So the piercing questions confront you. How much longer will you call relapse weakness instead of seeing it as the signal that deeper wounds remain unhealed? How many more years will you numb yourself rather than endure the fire of transformation?
How many times will you trade counterfeit transcendence for real wholeness? And most urgently, will you dare to practice observation, boundaries, shadow work, reframing, fidelity, discernment, and endurance until the cycle breaks? Because Jung's insight is merciless but liberating. What you repress enslaves you, but what you face can heal you. Addiction is not the end of your story. It is the threshold of individuation. If you endure the silence, if you practice fidelity, if you embrace truth over illusion, addiction becomes the very fire that remakes you. Healing is not escape, it is integration. And integration begins with the decision you make today to stop numbing and start living. Addiction is not merely a habit to break. It is the language of your unconscious demanding that you finally face what you have buried. Every craving is a summons. Every relapse is a revelation of the wound that still bleeds. And every moment of honesty is the beginning of healing. The question is not whether you can stop using, but whether you will dare to descend into the roots of your pain and let them be transformed. Jung warned that what you repress will enslave you. Addiction proves this truth with merciless clarity. But he also promised that what you face can set you free. Will you keep numbing yourself, repeating the cycle of craving and collapse? Or will you accept that the fire you fear is the very fire that purifies? Will you continue to call yourself weak, or will you recognize that your longing is not for the substance but for wholeness? Will you hide behind secrecy, or will you expose the truth that begins to dismantle shame? Healing will not come quickly. It will not flatter you. It will ask for endurance, patience, and daily fidelity. But is it not worth more than another night of escape, another morning of regret, another cycle of despair? Do you not already sense that the counterfeit transcendence has failed you, and that the only way forward is through the pain you once fled? The call to action is severe but simple. Today, take one act of truth. Confess to someone you trust. Set one boundary you have long avoided. Sit in silence without numbing. Choose one ritual of integrity over one ritual of compulsion. Your addiction is not the end. It is the threshold of individuation, the beginning of a life no longer divided but whole. The only question is whether you will numb the call again or answer it.